Hello, and welcome to Therapy Clarity. I'm Deri Latimer. I'm a keynote conference speaker, and I specialize in speaking on resilience and all things about happy, healthy workplaces. And I am joined by...
I'm Dr. Kelly Penner Hutton, and I am a psychologist who works in private practice at Peace of Mind Therapy and Consultation. And I was Deri's therapist when she sought therapy.
Yes. And we thought it would be really fun and interesting to record our experiences, our shared experiences, which are, of course, from a completely different perspective, and offer that to others who might be wondering about the experience of therapy. And we have a story that we thought that you might find interesting. So Kelly, maybe just to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what drew you to become a psychologist? What was behind, your motivation behind that direction?
Yeah, probably very similar to many other therapists that are out there, whether they're psychologists or counselors. But, had an experience when I was growing up with family members who had some mental health issues, and found that it was really difficult for people to seek services, to find the right services, and to feel supported and comforted as they're going through these, difficult, challenging times in their life. And so as I was transitioning from high school into university, I figured that was probably the best direction for me to go in, was to try and help people.
Lovely. That is certainly nice to hear. And one of the things that I'm always curious about, again, is what's behind someone's choices, but also what are sort of some of the fundamental beliefs, if you like, that support your approach to clients, your beliefs about the people who, like me, who enter your office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess partly it's just because I genuinely care about people. I really do. I care about every single person who sits in front of me, whether they're in my therapy office or office. And I just want what's best for people. Now, everyone will have challenges throughout their life. Everybody. I know I've had mine. You've had yours. We have our ups and downs, right? And it's a bit of a journey. So for me, mental health isn't about obtaining this perfect picture of mental health, but about the journey that we're on, and the ups and the downs, and how we handle them, or maybe sometimes how we don't handle them. But then eventually, maybe we get some support and get back on the path again and continue on that journey.
Yeah, I love that. And I know a big motivation for both of us in doing this and sharing our experiences is that we'd like to send a message that that this therapeutic process is one of, it can seem a little bit like experimentation a bit. In other words, a person might start off, might come, meet with a therapist and find things aren't working.
Yeah, and
And
that's what happened with you, right? Do you want to share
it
a little bit
is.
about that?
Yeah. So when I in March of 2020, I just started feeling horrible, and I didn't understand why.
Mhm.
And it took many months. Of course, we were in the throes of COVID at the time, for me to even get in to see a therapist. So the first one I visited, it was I just knew right away from the first appointment it wasn't a good match, and I did not go back to that therapist. Then it again took a while. I found another therapist, started there, and went for several sessions. So I thought we had, like, the chemistry was decent,
Mhm.
but I wasn't finding that I was getting any better through the sessions. And it was interesting because she agreed. She thought that there was something going on, that maybe I needed something else, a different approach than she was using, and she recommended EMDR, which brought me to you. So maybe you can tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about
Before we
EMDR.
do that, maybe we'll just highlight that it's really important that people continue to seek out services if they don't find that right match right away. So for the first therapist that you saw, the chemistry wasn't there, the rapport wasn't there between the two of you, but also the therapeutic approach that particular psychologist had recommended wasn't a good fit for you. Right away, you had a body reaction to it, right?
Yes,
Did
I
you want to
did.
talk a
Yep.
little bit about how you knew that wasn't the right fit for you?
Sure. Well, and again, this was, the first appointment I had, and I just wanted to feel better. So that's, when it was a gentleman at the time, when he asked me, how can I help? I just said, I just want to feel better. I feel terrible. I can't sleep. And I just feel horrible. And I shared in that appointment, as he was scoping me out a bit, getting to know me, that I had an experience with a person I cared about who died by suicide in my 20s. And certainly that was a big event in my life. And as we were chatting, he shared that he thought I compartmentalized things, and that he thought one approach might be, for him, it's similar to an approach he uses with soldiers, for example, who come back from war, who have to compartmentalize their experience in order to do the job they have to do. When they come back, he would show them images of war and of people dying in war. So he sort of said to me, I would perhaps show you pictures of people who have died by suicide. And I just instantly knew that would not work for me. In fact, it frightened me, to be really honest. It was so it was very unpleasant. I just knew this wouldn't be the experience that I, wanted to venture down, even though I didn't know what I needed at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the second approach was, again, this person who I think we had decent rapport, was cognitive behavior therapy, which I was somewhat familiar with, I guess, but it just didn't, there was no relief that I saw at all in the, number of sessions that I had with her.
Yeah. So the first one you're talking about is a type of exposure therapy. We use exposure a lot in therapy, and that's one example of a type of exposure therapy, but that type didn't gel with you very much. Actually, I think you got a very strong visceral reaction just in your gut saying that wasn't going to be a good match for you. The second one, again, you had that good rapport with your psychologist, but the work that you were doing, that cognitive behavior therapy, wasn't a good match for you. And that's probably because you had a ton of those cognitive skills even before you had the depression that you ended up with during the pandemic, right? And sometimes cognitive skills are wonderful and can be very helpful, but they just weren't helpful for you at that time where you were then, right?
Yes.
It might have been helpful another time, but not this time, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's really great is you didn't give up, right?
Did not.
You got a little
No.
nudge from some friends to keep going. But really it was you who decided to keep going. And I just think that's so valuable for a lot of people out there that don't find that right match, either with the therapist in terms of the rapport between them and the therapist, or with the therapy, the type of intervention being used, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So sometimes you got to keep trying until you find the right match both ways.
Yeah. And that's, again, another, as you said, another real important part of the message. We believe in doing something like this and sharing this, that it's what works for one person might not for the other. So keep going until you find that really good match.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I am an EMDR therapist. I am trained in EMDR and I train others in EMDR therapy. I do use cognitive behavior therapy and aspects of exposure therapy in my work. I also use a lot of other things. So mindfulness, I do animal assisted therapies, I use dialectical behavior therapy tools. So I incorporate all that into my EMDR therapy intervention tool. So we can pick and choose kind of what's needed for each client when they come in. For you didn't need those cognitive strategies. So we actually needed to give you different strategies at the beginning, right?
Yes.
But I guess what's important is that EMDR is really a whole comprehensive therapy. It's not just about the reprocessing of old memories. Okay? That's an important part, but not the only part. So we always want to start off with what we call stabilization first, or preparation phase in EMDR. So I'm going to learn a little bit about you and what you need, and then figure out what tools, coping strategies would be helpful for you before we move into doing that reprocessing work. Okay. So EMDR sets you up to be able to do that reprocessing work so that when you're ready to visit some of those most difficult times in your life, those past experiences that have set up the way that you are feeling and thinking, and what's going on in your body now. So all the symptoms that you're having, right? Those past experiences contribute to how you're feeling in the now.
Right.
You're ready for it because we've set you up for it, right? So then you can visit it. And I remember you saying at one point in time that this was a gentler, kinder way of visiting the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was in response to a question I was asked about, my experience with the EMDR, that, yeah, it was just kind of a kind and gentle way to go to the dark places. And because what I know when I entered the whole process, although I didn't really understand what was going on for me, I knew, to me, the anxiety, which I had really high, and any depression that was there, those to me are kind of the same. I knew something under there. There had to be something under there, underneath, that was that caused me to experience those symptoms. And I know, one of the things I appreciated, Kelly, is that you provided me with really good grounding tools through the process. So and by ground, it's just sort of helping me get back into my body, because I think I always have been, maybe in some ways, really disconnected from my body, and I found it was really tough for me to connect back. So you would, at the end of every session, kind of give me a little grounding exercise, which really helped me to, between sessions, to sort of work on that. Made a significant difference to my experience of the whole process.
You did have those good cognitive strategies, right? And for me, I'm always thinking about the 3 levels of the brain, I guess. We've got the top part of the brain that really deals with those cognitions. So what we're thinking is up there, and that's kind of where our reasoning comes from, right, in our prefrontal cortex. And then the middle of the brain, we have those emotions, especially in the limbic system. We've got the amygdala, which is our danger system, right? So it alerts us to danger or threats in the environment and sets off a fight, flight, freeze type of a response in our sympathetic nervous system. And then we have the body, which is kind of more bottom of the brain, that more sensory motor kind of stuff. And so for you had lots of great cognitive skills, but they weren't working for you because these kind of dormant memories from the past had been re-triggered by what was happening in the present. Right? And when they came up, you lost the cognitive abilities, right? You're back in those times. So we had to go to the emotion and the body level to get you back into what we would call your window of tolerance. So a space where you could tolerate what you were thinking and feeling, both emotions and in your body, and just be able to feel a little bit more comfortable again, right? And so we use strategies that would be more focused on the body to help to ground you. So breathing is a lovely one. You'd already had a breathing strategy, and then we added on some other ones for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember even the, simple strategies of being mindful when I'm walking and listening to the crunch of the snow under my boots, and just stopping from time to time and looking around. And it all seems so ridiculously simple, and yet it really makes a huge difference, which, again, at the time, I know sometimes leaving, I'd be thinking, well, what difference is that going to make, really, if I pay attention to how I walk? But really does. So it's just another little tool or strategy to help to sort of bring you back, as you say, back to connect more with your body, which really worked for me. Yeah. So
Mhm.
we've talked about EMDR, but can you tell us what EMDR stands for?
Sure, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. And it was first invented, I guess you would call it, by Francine Shapiro. And Francine had noticed one day when she was going through a hard time and walking through a park, that as she was thinking about the difficult time that she was going through, her eyes actually just moved back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And as she continued to focus on this difficult, challenging thing that was in her memory banks, and those eyes moved back and forth, she noticed that it became less vivid, that her emotions changed, that she was able to tolerate it a little bit better and calm down. And then she started to think, well, I wonder if there's something to this, right? And because she was taking a PhD, she was able to do some research on eye movements and to see if that made a difference for people when they brought up their own challenging, difficult situations from the past. So as you bring up something that you want to reprocess, so you bring it up in a way that it activates the image that goes with it, and maybe even the worst part of it, the belief that you have about yourself as you think about this time, and then the emotions that you're feeling now and where you feel that in your body. And we start doing eye movements. So sometimes therapists will move their fingers back and forth and you would follow the fingers, or we might have a light bar in our room where you follow the light back and forth, or a dot on a computer screen that goes back and forth. Those are all eye movements. We would do that for about 30 seconds or so, and then stop and have somebody take a breath and notice what they're noticing now, whatever that might be. And what they're finding now in some of the research that's coming out with some brain imaging studies is that the eye movements actually ignite or activate parts of our brain that are dormant or completely asleep when we bring up traumatic memories. So because we can activate parts of the brain that normally aren't awake when we're re-experiencing bad stuff, right? We're able to process it. So there's different parts of the brain that do come online: the prefrontal cortex, the left side of the brain, the visual spatial sketch pad, a whole bunch of other important sounding structures in the brain, right? Come online. But the basics is that if you keep the memory that you're processing in mind, okay, and we have the image up in our brain and we're thinking about it and feeling it in this moment, and then we add that stimulation, the eye movements, for example, it does a couple things. It taxes our working memory, it helps to move that memory a bit, and it decreases the vividness of it. So when we decrease the vividness of that memory, the emotions that are associated with it go down as well. And then we end up getting to a place where we can think about the memory, but not feel distressed by it, right? And when we get there, then we actually install a positive belief about yourself that you'd like to believe about yourself as you think about this memory, and all of the body felt sensations that go with that positive belief as you say it and link it up to the memory. And we install that with sets of bilateral stimulation, or those eye movements. And then we just focus on the body. We scan from head to toe. So as you bring up that memory and that positive belief, what do you notice now? And usually we get to a place where it feels comfortable. So this awful bad thing happened, and it will always be bad, right? But when you think about it now, it doesn't disturb you anymore. And I think that's where you got to on your hardest memory to process.
Yes, I definitely did. And I remember that exact wording, as we had chatted through our sessions, was you sort of distinguishing between the thing, which is awful and always will be awful.
Mhm.
But at the end, it wasn't distressing to me. And, just listening to you go over it again, I'm finding myself kind of reliving some of what we did, and it was astounding to me, Kelly, how easy it was for me to go back and to have a memory. And, you know, so these weren't memories that I'm thinking about every day or that I've probably even thought about it in many, many years. And yet when, you know, as we went back, sort of following this thread, um, I could find a memory. There was a memory there. And that was kind of, you know, fascinating to me, you know, that I didn't struggle going, well, I don't know. I don't remember that ever happening. I definitely had that memory. So where I remember we started with me, I believe the first question, or one of the first you asked me, is what's the worst part of what you're experiencing right now? And I had said, I've lost my self-confidence. So that sense of self seems gone. And that was kind of the thread we followed. So it was like, you know, when was, you know, the most recent time you remember? Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And then we went all the way back to when I was a child, which was just remarkable, I thought.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
EMDR therapy, we have a model that helps to explain it for us called the Adaptive Information Processing Model. And what the AIP model, Adaptive Information Processing, tells us is that, first of all, humans always move towards health, physical or mental health. And we can trust our brain is always going to try and do that when it can do that. But when trauma occurs, something really adverse or negative happens to somebody, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a trauma. I mean, you could receive some criticism from somebody or be embarrassed in a certain situation, be bullied, maybe not to a level where it's life-threatening. But these negative or adverse experiences impact us over time, over our life, especially if we don't process them. So when something really awful happens, our information processing system gets blocked, the way that we naturally process information, right? Through often even our rapid eye movement sleep during one of our sleep cycles. In rapid eye movement sleep, you know, we're taking that information that we've gathered from our day, from our week, and our brain is trying to process it and link it up to other like experiences in our brain that we hold maybe in symbolic file folders, for example. And so
Right.
for most things, it can link up information, right? So you learn something new about a lizard. It's going to pull out the reptiles file, put that new fact about a lizard in the reptiles file. Off we go to the next thing that needs to be processed or linked up in information in our brain. But when it comes to trauma, it can't link up to anything. So it floats around in our brain, ready to be triggered at any time. It's almost like a snapshot. So you think of a, you know, snapshot that we print out, or now we have digital copies on our phones or computers. But a snapshot kind of has that image on it. But when you look at a snapshot, you also get the emotions that are associated with that snapshot coming up, right? Some body sensations that are associated with it, your thoughts about yourself and the world. Okay, so it's those
Yeah.
3 levels of the brain, all stored along with our sensory information, so our 5 senses, on that snapshot. So if we have a bunch of those snapshots scattered around and not put into file folders, that means they can get triggered in the now, in the present, right? So
Yeah.
even though you hadn't thought about those memories that were disturbing to you, you hadn't thought about them in a long, long, long time. You had something happen in the now that triggered that snapshot coming up to the surface again, right? And
Yeah.
once it was there was no putting it back until we processed it.
Yeah. And that is exactly what happened in March of 2020 when I got a phone call from a friend that her son had just died by suicide.
Mhm.
And really from then on, I just got sick. And I again didn't know. Uh, and I certainly was aware I had this experience of suicide in my life over 30 years ago. Um, you know, and I knew that was awful. I really thought I was, you know, I had done some work on that. But wow. And I literally felt like every part of me shut down. You know, definitely my brain wasn't working properly. You know, I lost a lot of weight. It was just nothing worked. I couldn't function really. And I remember you telling me about the snapshots, Kelly, and I loved that so much. That visual worked so well for me. Imagining, because when I thought of those other memories, that I had, the one when I was 6 or when I was 10, or, just other memories that were just normal moments, in anyone's life, but yet I had told myself certain things at
Mhm.
at that time, and felt certain things, that it was like all those snapshots. I was I felt like I was overwhelmed by all of them. And when you described it to me, I remember I saw them as little floating tissue sheets that sort of came flying at me, but it was the same. It just made so much sense to me that that is why I it happened so fast, and I was, so unwell.
Yeah. So
And
what you're
yeah,
describing there is that when we have similar things happen to us, right, over time, they kind of link up together. There's like this thread that goes through and connects all those different snapshots. So when we light up one, that whole network becomes lit up. So it can be very powerful if you've had a lot of those types of experiences in your life, right?
yeah,
So when you
totally
came
makes
in,
sense.
yeah, and you alluded to this just a little while ago, but when you came in, we did start doing some grounding for you, some coping strategies, but then we needed to figure out, what do we need to process, right?
Yeah,
So I just simply asked you, what's really bugging you right now? So you mentioned that symptom of that lack of confidence.
yeah,
So we use a technique that helps you kind of get past your conscious layer of understanding, and it helps you go into the subconscious. So stuff that you wouldn't necessarily tell me about, because you wouldn't
mm,
think it would be relevant, maybe, or and maybe it just didn't occur to you to tell your therapist, right? But I get you to
right.
think about the last time you were feeling that lack of confidence, and light up those three parts of the brain. So what were you, what's the image that goes with that? What's the belief about yourself that goes with that? A negative belief. What emotions do you feel now as you bring that up? And where do you feel that in your body? And when we just kind of float back through time to other times when you've also experienced that, what are we doing? We're lighting up that memory network, right? So the
Mm,
thread is lighting up and finding all the snapshots that go on it. And that's when
mm,
you started telling me some of the things in your life that you said were more normal kind of experiences, but obviously that had been impacting you over
yeah,
time because you'd held on to them. They weren't processed yet, even though they were just regular kind of life experiences, right?
yeah, right.
And so actually the first memory, or the earliest memory that you identified, doesn't seem like a trauma memory at all, right? But we needed to process that one first because it set the foundation for this whole memory network, all the snapshots connected on the thread. And once we processed that memory, then we went to the more challenging, difficult memories.
Yeah, yeah. It does make so much sense now, and as as you describe it that way. And I remember us when we went back through that network, that memory network. There were some memories we got to, and through fairly short discussion, it wasn't it wasn't one that was, we needed to process. Like, so I can't remember exactly how we determined that, but I think it was, you would ask me some questions, and you also used a bit of a number scale from time to time,
Yeah,
sort of from some 0 to 7. And so it might have been based on my response there, to those questions. But I remember we definitely did not process every single, or have to go through the detail. Yeah,
no. And for a lot of people, we really just have to process the earliest or the youngest memory, and then the kind of the most um, impactful memory, right? The one
yeah,
that's really troubling you, even though maybe even a long time has gone by. So
right.
it's those two from the past, and then anything else we need to clear up. So we kind of just check in with those memories. And we use two scales in EMDR therapy. One is called the subjective units of disturbance scale, and it's a 0 to 10 scale that just measures simply your distress or disturbance in this moment as you bring something up. So 0 is neutral or doesn't bother me at all. 10's the worst you can imagine feeling. Okay. And so
Yeah,
if you bring up a memory and we again light up the three parts of the brain and you're not feeling any distress, well, that one's processed. We don't need to work on that one.
right.
Right. But if you're
Yeah.
feeling some distress right now as you think about it, even though this happened, a long time ago, well, then that's something that we should probably work on, right? Then
Yeah.
we have this other scale that measures our positive belief with the memory. So how much do you really believe this positive belief as you think about that memory now? And that's that wonky scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is completely false and 7 is completely true. So as you bring up that memory and the positive belief of I am competent or I'm confident, for example, how true does that feel to you right now? And so 7 would be completely true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. There were so many layers to it, that's for sure. And yet experiencing it, I just experienced it, so I felt like it was, and that's maybe where that description I used of that safe and gentle way. I just, I felt like you were just taking me along a journey, and it was kind of easy for me. And I did like that I was doing something, that I was active in it, and that I got to know I could follow
Mhm.
like I sort of knew what was coming almost sometimes from time
Yeah.
to time. So there was that repetition.
And
It
it's so
was,
interesting because when I train new therapists, they're worried about that repetition, right? They're
yeah,
wondering, how is that going to come across to somebody? Is it going to be robotic? Like, is it going to feel real to someone if I'm saying the same kind of things over and over again? But for me, my perspective is that we're providing a structure for you to be able to process something that was awful for you. Right? That's why our rapid eye movement sleep can't do it. So we keep having nightmares about it, for example, or flashbacks during the day because the structure isn't there. So EMDR therapy really provides that structure that allows us to process it. We have this kind of going into it a bit and then coming out again, right? And I can't remember, did we use eye movements for you or did we use touch?
we used eye movements, so that the light
Mhm.
board, and we also several times used the buzzies, I believe you call them, but the handheld things that buzz. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
used both. I remember several times, and I kind of liked that. I liked both. Again, for me, I think I felt like I was more active in it. More, I was again doing something, like a real partner
Right.
in,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
really what we were. We were partners on this journey together, right?
yeah,
As you were moving more and more towards health again.
yeah,
Mhm.
yes. And, when I mentioned the some of the memories, they were just kind of everyday things, or they're things that lots of people have experienced in their life. I know Gabor Mate, who I really admire his work, who talks about trauma, says, trauma is not what happened to you, it's what happens inside of you
Mm.
because of what happened to you. So that trauma can be an everyday-ish experience to one person, but to another person, something happens inside. And it was remarkable to me that even thinking about my 6-year-old self, that I could imagine, I could think about the beliefs that 6-year-old, what might be happening inside of that 6-year-old. So it was really, again, I thought a really cool, interesting process, and really, really valuable.
Right. And in that young memory with your 6-year-old, you were able to provide your 6-year-old self some comfort.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. Which again, and I know as we talked, um, I felt like my 60-year-old self felt that what that 6-year-old, was experiencing. Yeah. So it's or what comfort I was giving to that 6-year-old self. Again,
Mhm.
um it's something that needs to be experienced, I think, right? In order for people to really understand how powerful it is.
Mhm.
And for me, from the time I saw you, which until the time we were done, so to speak, I think it was about 5 or 6 months, and yeah, maybe 5 months, even 6 months.
Mhm.
Um, and and it was, again, I really felt like, I was better. I didn't need any medication after that. I was able to wean off it. It was a transforming experience for me, which is again one I really want to share with other people, because I think one of the beliefs I have is that therapy can be an experience like mine, in the sense that it can be, and it doesn't mean I'll never seek therapy again. I'm sure I will at some point, but that it can be an experience that's just a beginning. There's a beginning and an end, that is not necessarily something that's ongoing. It can be a shorter experience, if you like, or a more focused experience. And does that make sense for you, or do you find that, or I'm sure you see everything, right? You see some clients who come for a long period of time, and some who are there for a shorter period of time, depending on what they come in with, I guess. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, we have
Yeah.
some people that have gone through a lot of trauma throughout their lives, starting when they were very little, moving into adulthood. So for those clients, I'm probably going to spend a longer time with them, right?
Yeah.
Maybe even over several years. And then other people will come in with just one or two things that they need to work on. And so they
Right.
can be in and out of my office fairly quickly, right?
Right.
There might be people that have a lot of things to work on, but really right now, this one thing is really bothering them. They just need to clean that up a little bit, and then they can keep moving on. Right. And
Yeah.
then they might come back again later to clean some more things up. And that's what I love about EMDR. We don't have to do everything all at once.
Right. Yeah. And again, having lived it, I would say certainly that makes sense to me, that you could at another time go back and sort of, there might be something else that you want to process or to explore. But anyway, I found it to be a very cool thing. Um, okay, so one of the I wanted to share something about an email that you had sent me after one that I sent to you, and around the time that I was writing my book. But I was going to ask you, since we're talking about mental health and mental well-being, what if you were telling somebody about what mental health means to you, what does it mean to you? How would you describe mental health?
I can tell you what it isn't. It isn't that everything is perfect. That is not what it is. Mental health for me is being able to live my experience, whatever that might be, but to be able to continue moving down a path or journey in life, right? Sometimes I'm healing a lot of the time. Sometimes you're not having to heal. You feel pretty good. You're at a plateau. Mental health is really about managing the ups and downs of life, getting the help when you need it, the support when times are challenging. Maybe there's been a death or an accident or something bad has happened, and allowing yourself to reach out and be supported by somebody at that time, whether it's friends, family members, or a therapist. And I really do think that everybody could use a therapist, and certainly recommend it to all therapists that they have a therapist and do their own work.
Yeah.
Right. But,
Right.
it's learning how to be present in the moment, how to be able to accept what is, to be able to focus on what needs to be done. But not only that, how you're feeling about it, and just acknowledge and accept the feelings that are there, because it's okay to feel. Right.
Yeah.
We don't have to feel really awful for a long time. And maybe in another interview, we can talk a little bit about my pool analogy. But we need to be able to accept and acknowledge what's there, and then ground ourselves in the present so that we can be there for ourselves and be there for others.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that pool analogy, because I love that. That was also very powerful. Yeah, there were many gifts that you provided to me during our time together, and one of them was about just being with more challenging emotions, instead of moving past too quickly, to just allow them to be there and to think about where they showed up in my body, you know, and the idea of what that they're, I know through lots of reading I've done, I've thought about, so what's the message, you know, that, so here's some agitation or some anger. So what, you know, where might that be coming from? And just being comfortable with it, that it's not an enemy, that it's there for a reason. And that was really, really useful for me. I use that all the time in most of my meditations now. So yes, you know, similar to what you said, that the mental health to me is really about, you know, when things are rocking, you know, to be right there and fully embrace it, and also when other things come up, to be okay with that, and see what message or what learning there can be. So we humans are complex, aren't we, Kelly?
We really are. And you know what? A lot of the time, Deri, it comes down to connection, right?
Yeah,
Connecting with your body and what your body is telling you, connecting with others. And we certainly lost a lot of that during the pandemic. Just as you're triggered, you lose all of your structure, your supports that you naturally had built into your life, right?
yeah,
And so that really got disrupted as well. And certainly now that we can start getting back to those connections again, I think that's going to be really helpful for people.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I remember because a lot of speaking I do, and I'm very interested in resilience and mental well-being, and often when I'm speaking, it's in that space. And I remember seeing my brother during this time, and at one point he said, you know, Deri, I couldn't think of a better person this could have happened to. You know, this was when I was still feeling really terrible. And I sort of looked at him like, what?
Yeah.
But you know, I understood what he meant, or I got to understand what he meant, that because I want to do something with this, and share this message with other people who are, again, considering therapy, that it's not scary, that it's um, that there are people like you who come in caring about you, just, you know, but they just have that as their go-to, you know. Again, Gabor Mate talks about the importance of compassion, you know, and in the approach of a therapist, and I certainly experienced that from you. And that, of course, no matter what approach someone used, without that caring really being there, it would be a longer haul, or a tougher haul probably, for both of us. So that's lovely and wonderful. Well, before we end this segment, because we're going to do more, there's lots more we want to talk about, I do want to just read this email that you actually sent to me, which you may not remember, but it was after I had written my book, and I'd said in an email to you that you saved my life. And then you responded with this email, which I'll keep forever. So here's how it goes. It says, I am honored to have been your partner on your journey. Keep in mind that you did all the heavy lifting, starting from the moment you recognized that you needed help. Your perseverance is amazing and can be credited with your recovery, along with your insight, bravery, and willingness to go there. So in actuality, you saved yourself. And you know, I say that to myself all the time. I saved myself. And for anyone watching this, you know, when you reach out and seek a therapist, know that that's exactly what you're doing. You're helping yourself, you're saving yourself, and this person is your partner. Does that sort of resonate with you, Kelly, that we
Absolutely.
partnered up on this? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know my staff, but I don't look at myself as an expert necessarily in our relationship, right? We're walking together down a path, we're on the same journey. I'm just going to bring in some guidance for you to get you there, provide the structure. And in this case, we used EMDR therapy as the structure.
Yeah. Yeah, it was wonderful. It was an amazing experience. So we're going to talk more, because there were many things that we did that that I found, again, and they might have seemed like smaller moments through our time together, that I found really meaningful. And again, you had this wonderful way of creating images like the pool analogy. So we'll talk about that again in another session.
Excellent. I'm
So
looking forward to our discussion.
thanks, me too. And for anyone who's watched, please, thank you very much. And please send comments or share this with others who you think might find it useful. This is our first time doing this, but we plan on doing more and sharing more. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.